Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you get something out of today's episode. And if you're not new here, you have to leave a review, interact with the content somehow, still share it with somebody. You know we would do the same for you guys. Our guest today is retired Master Sergeant Phil Stone. He spent the duration of his career in Special Forces with the Army from 1977 all the way until 2004. So he's seen a pretty massive evolution in the landscape of, alternating warfare and unconventional warfare.
Unconventional warfare,
yeah.
definitely.
Done some pretty interesting things in his career. So welcome, Phil. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you.
Fantastic. 27 years of service is no joke. That's quite a bit of change that you've probably seen over the years. So before we dive into that wild story that I'm sure you have, we got to talk in the beginning of the show. Let's talk about how you joined the military. What inspired you?
Good question. Good lead off on it. I'm not your atypical guy. I was actually very good in high school, graduated very high in my class. However, I really didn't like where I was. It's just the neighborhood I was in. Y'all ever been to Pasadena, Texas?
I have not. I've only been passing through. I've never spent much time.
It's got a nickname called Stinkadena. It's right near the Houston Ship Channel. There's a whole row of refineries, and if the wind's blowing on the wrong day, you smell it all. But my parents had moved us there when I was 10, so I hated it.
Sure, yeah.
So I had been originally born in Oklahoma and grown up there until I was 10 years old. And when your parents forcefully move you to an area and you now are growing up in a strange area in middle school and high school, I really didn't like the area. And came time to go to college and tried to, I was playing football, playing sports. So I was trying to think that I could still go play college football somewhere.
Everybody in Texas, right?
Yeah, everybody in Texas thinks you can. Tried to apply for a couple of scholarships and started hearing back from them and was getting a lot of negatives, coming back on the scholarships in school. And my dad was like, I'm not paying for anything. I went in the military. I got my GI Bill. Then I went to college, and that's how it paid for. So there's the junior college down the street. You can still live, and I just didn't want to do that.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
Little did I know that 1977, military really wasn't very popular. I guess I was kind of blinders up, just caught my own world. But I did grow up in the 60s and 70s where Rat Patrol, combat, D-Day, movies like D-Day, The Longest Day.
Yeah.
You had military war movies on all the time. And of course, I have to admit, John Wayne was in there in a lot of those movies. And when you talk to guys my age, when the Green Berets came out in 1968, my parents wouldn't let me see it.
Okay.
Too bloody.
Too violent.
It was rated R, right? But I finally got to watch it much later. And then that's where, when I went to the recruiter and kind of figured I wanted to go in the Army and had that, there wasn't any now let me go Google or watch YouTube about learning about anything. I went down to the recruiter's office and said, I want to go into the Army and I want to be a light weapons leader and I want to be a Green Beret. I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, how was that, kind of growing up in the Vietnam era? Right.
Watching it on TV every day.
Yeah, and you had the blinders on a little bit. You said just with your perception of the military.
Well, as far as not the blinders being on, that I didn't realize people hated them so much.
Oh, okay.
I grew up, thinking that we were winning the war the whole time.
Sure.
And the way they would describe it on CBS News with Walter Cronkite was pretty much with the kill count.
Yeah.
They plastered up there every day, right? So you always think you're doing well. And I remember getting into arguments with a guy, because he had told us that we had lost it. And being a young kid, I was like, no, we didn't lose it. We went to the negotiating table and we negotiated a truce and we got all our prisoners back. So how can you say we lost it?
Yeah.
What I was, had my blinders up about was all the protesting. When you're a kid, and we didn't have the internet. We didn't, if they didn't show it on the news. And I don't know, as a kid playing football, I wasn't really watching the news all that much,
Especially in rural Texas too. I mean, you're probably not seeing too much of the protesting in that area.
We didn't have any protesting.
Yeah.
You're right. And it was a very conservative area, I would say. So I got in the military in 1977, and as you mentioned, I think I didn't immediately go into Special Forces. They wouldn't let you in right off the bat. They didn't have any sort of program to go in straight in. Vietnam War was over, and they were shrinking like crazy.
Yep.
So I, went to the recruiter, and I kind of got talked into, well, just sign up for a year in Korea, 11 Bravo. You'll get your overseas tour out of the way. Mm-hmm. And back then, for me, what I had heard was go to Europe for 3 years or go to Korea for a year. That's kind of what I heard. Mm-hmm. The 1 year sounds a whole lot better.
Yes.
And it turned out to work out in my favor because I went to Korea, 11 Bravo, straight out AIT, private E2. I hadn't been there a month, maybe a month. They hauled the battalion down to the auditorium that they have on the camp. And there these gods walk in. I swear I thought they were all 6'5", 165 pounds, and all had these shapes, with their V-shaped bodies, and they were recruiting for Special Forces. And I raised my hand, and right then and there they took us out, and we had to do a PT test, and we had to do a written test. And I passed both of those, and they said, well, when did you get here? I just got here.
Bags are still packed.
Well, you got to finish your tour. And I said, well, that's good because I'm only a private. Maybe by the time I finish, I'll be a Spec 4.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And that's what happened. I got near the end of my tour. And when my orders came up, it was not to attend Special Forces training. It was to go to the 9th Infantry Division and go to, I guess it's now called Joint
Base Lewis McChord.
Base Lewis McChord back there, and it was just Fort Lewis.
Okay.
And luckily, during that time frame, this is now 1978, you had officers and NCOs that would go and serve in Special Forces, and then they would come back to regular units. My company commander had done that already. He'd already gone to SF, been a team lead, and now he was trying to get his company command time in back in an infantry unit because there was no separate SF branch. He was an infantry officer. So I went in to see him, and I was also very lucky. My first sergeant was prior Special Forces and Ranger, and he had actually just come from the Q course as one of the instructors. So I said, look, I thought I was supposed to get orders for to be able to go try out, to go to the Q course, and he immediately, as first sergeants sometimes do to their young troops that they see, he saw something in me, I guess. But they got that fixed. So
excellent. So you got your sign off, I guess.
Got my sign off, got my orders, immediately came back, went through airborne school. Remember that was January of '79. Got to the Bragg in February, and the best thing that happened to me was the first part of the Q course didn't start for a while, and they had there wasn't any selection. I don't know, probably haven't had any guests that didn't go through selection, but I didn't. I didn't go through selection. It was all the first.
It was the PT test.
It was all the first phase, which is the first 28 days was their selection back then. But you got placed into. I bounced that. Sorry.
You're good.
You get placed into a training company, and and your class date's going to start. It's everything they're going to. It's like a pre-phase training. Everything you're going to do in the Q course, they're going through it because they want you to pass, right?
Yeah.
Number one thing it did for me, my feet got built up.
Mm-hmm.
Got rid of the blisters, got them toughened up, ready for the rucks, and that 6-week time frame really saved my bacon. Started off, and then immediately went into the Q course, and for me, the only delay was had to wait on a phase 3. So got through phase 1, got through phase 2. I went through as a weapons specialist. And back then, you went through heavy weapons and light weapons all in 8 weeks.
Wow.
7 days a week. There wasn't any breaks. Tests every week. Pop quizzes every day.
Yeah.
Major exams every Friday during
So you
the
got
weapons phase.
naturally, it hasn't changed much in that you got your metal tested
Yeah.
and you pushed forward and definitely achieved it.
Yeah.
And then what was next?
So for me, the big strange part was I mentioned that they were downsizing.
Yes.
So I graduated, and actually about a week before I was due to graduate, they came up and they said, look, you guys don't really have an assignment. You're going to have to come back to the school and be instructors.
Interesting.
Because there wasn't 5th, 7th, and 10th group were full. That's what we were being told.
Okay.
And they said, but look, you have a chance to go to DLI. Would you like to go out to Monterey, California, and go to language school? And of course, then you didn't go to language school as part of the Q course. You went to the unit, and then you went to language school at a later date, or they ran an internal language school there on the base.
All right.
And I can get to that later. Because I did end up going to German, but I did it up at Fort Devens. I didn't go out to Monterey.
Okay.
But I volunteered to go to Monterey. I was like, Monterey, California, get me the hell out of Fort Bragg, North
Absolutely.
Carolina.
Don't blame you.
I've been here a year. I hate it. I hate being hated being a student, but I was
Sure.
ready to be out of the Q course. And if anything, I'll go up to DLI. So we graduate. That was September. And I remember that was on a Saturday we graduated. And the first sergeant from your training company that you're still a part of, he calls us in. He goes, well, I got good news and bad news. Good news is you're still going to language school, but it's not going to be till January. Bad news, well, good news you're still going. Bad news is it doesn't start till January. And it's September, and I don't want to be stuck doing details on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, picking up pine cones for 3 months. That doesn't sound like fun.
Does not.
It's not
And he
Green Beret
goes,
work.
well, I got an option. We got a demo class starts Monday. So you go back in as a student, except now you're getting another qualification,
Okay.
another specialty, school trained specialty.
Yeah.
Yeah, sign me up. So that Monday, I got a day off and I went back and I started the engineer course.
That's pretty cool.
So come December, finished the engineer course. I got called into the first sergeant's office. I got good news and bad news. Good news, you're still going to DLI. It's not till May.
Oh, they pushed it again.
So they pushed it again. I said, first sergeant, I think I'm ready to get to a team.
Sure.
So he sent me over to 3rd Battalion, 5th Group. He called up the sergeant major, sent me over there, and I go over there and talk to the sergeant major, and let me take a drink of water, and y'all appreciate this story.
Take your
I'm
time.
already appreciating.
I know.
You come over to the sergeant major, and I'm in the S3 office, and I'm not even a buck sergeant yet. I'm still a Spec 4, newly graduated Green Beret. I think I had gotten to go through the E5 promotion board, but I hadn't gotten my E5 yet. And he looks at him and he goes, can you type?
Oh, no.
And stupid me. Yes, Sergeant Major, I can. Well, I got a job for you.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Should not have said that. Should not have said that. Should not have said that. So I go back to the first sergeant and he goes, well, did he offer you a job? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want it. And back then we had, they called it, we called it the mini Pentagon. It was across the street from where we were, and it was where all the assignments were made for all the special forces. And there was a lady there, her name was Mrs. Alexandra, and he picked up the phone and he called her and he goes, I'm sending a young troop over there for you. And he hung up the phone and he goes, go down to the Classic store and get you a bottle of Jack Daniels and a dozen red roses, and Mrs. A is expecting you.
Oh, that is awesome.
And I went over and I handed her the bottle of Jack and I handed her red roses, and she goes, where would you like to go?
Okay.
And I said, I would like to go to the 10th group. I want to go to 10th Special Forces Group. And, oh, you want to go to Bad Tolls? Mrs. A, I just got back from Korea. Oh, you've already done your overseas assignment. Yes, ma'am, I have. I would like to go to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And if y'all haven't ever heard of Fort Devens, at the time, Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base probably had, I don't know, 50, 60,000 active duty people.
Okay.
Fort Devens has 3,000.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very
It's
small.
35 miles outside of Boston. I had quite a few of my buddies from the Q course had made it, and that's where they were assigned. So I was like, yeah, let me get out of North Carolina. So I drove up to and got up there decent right before Christmas, right before of 1979, and reported into 10th Group, and then ended up, I think because of that assignment to South Korea, I never came down on overseas orders. Oh, yeah. And I ended up staying there till I got out in 1986.
Incredible.
But got assigned to A Company, 3rd Battalion, 10th Group. And this is where, I lead into the story. I was still 20 years old. And I walked into my first team, and I think I've heard a couple of your guests. It may have been Zane say it. Zane was 28 when he graduated. So when he walked in, he had that immediate, he wasn't a punk kid off the block. Well, I got that look because I was a punk kid, 20 years old, off the block, thought I, knew it all and had just graduated.
Sure.
And you had mentioned how was it growing up during the Vietnam age. I walked into my team room, every single one of those guys except for 2 other guys. So 10 guys out of 12 had CIBs in Vietnam combat patches.
Tough shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Tough shoes to fill. And I walk in, the first thing they asked me, believe it or not, was not what skills you were. They got to that. The first question was actually, can you ski? And I'm being from Texas, I'm like, I can water ski.
Yeah.
I've never even been on a pair of snow skis. And with that said, I immediately went to Alaska within a week.
Okay.
Right after the holidays, I was in Alaska for 2 months, skiing with just regular Army, Air Force, Marines. They have a school up there, Black Rapids training site. Got sent up there, and that began, kind of my winter warfare career with 10th Group, because we lived on skis. We lived in the winter.
That's interesting. We haven't had anyone that's kind of spoken about a school like that, but I've always been very curious. What's kind of the process? What do you go through for that?
For learning that? Or
are you going down on skis shooting guns?
So how was it? So how did the school arrange? This particular school was 6 weeks long. So they're not there to just give you a week's worth of training and then put you out in the field.
Yeah.
Right. It was they labeled it an instructor course so that you could go back to your unit and then be an instructor for your unit.
Okay.
So there were, like I mentioned, there were Marines in there. There were a lot of Marine officers, second lieutenants that were in there. And they sent 10 of us from 10th Group. And why 10 of us? Because I think they had slots, got slots for 10 people. We went up there, 3 of us from the team, from the 10 that were selected up there. It's kind of a hodgepodge team that they sent up there. We're really good skiers. But of course, you're skiing on the Army at that time didn't understand about, and I don't know if they still have. I think they have gotten better. We were still skiing on World War II equipment. Just what the 10th Mountain Division had used way back when.
Same old problems that we deal with today, but we just move it up a generation.
Yeah. Yes, just moved it up. So white vapor-bearing boots, right? These are not mountain-bearing boots or ski boots. They're just cold weather boots that they're going to somehow fit into a binding. But doing that, you really learn your equipment doesn't become your weakest point. Your technique gets stronger.
Sure.
Because you can't rely upon the equipment to make up for any false shifting in your weight. So what you learn is that really you could wear any boot if you're skiing properly.
Okay.
But their conditioning, or their way they set it up, was a combination of downhill and cross-country skiing. The equipment that we had at the time, the heels really couldn't be locked down very well. They could, but I use the term very well.
Yeah.
But cross-country movement, they were actually awesome. They were very long. They weren't very heavy. Binding allowed you some freedom of movement. So just moving and walking with them, they were pretty good. So most of the time was spent, going over to, they had their own ski slope there at Black Rapids. And they had one of those lifts where you stick it between your cross, called a pommel lift, where it's a J-bar, right?
Yeah.
And you put that in, it takes you up. And they had a downhill course, and they broke us into 10-man teams, a squad, and assigned an instructor to us that was a very good regular Army, assigned to the school. The guy that, he was an E7, just a great skier, funny as could be, excellent guy, excellent cold weather instructor. And they ran us through their training program. And it started off just trying to get you to walk, and then try to get you to, shoot, move, and communicate all step of the way. And of course, after you've been living in the barracks, getting up, going over the ski slope, coming back to the barracks, the last 2 weeks, let's get real and let's load up on the helicopter. They took us to Gauquina Glacier. We pulled out the Akios, hiked in a couple of miles, set up the big cold weather tents with the Yukon stoves.
Oh, yeah.
You think those things are really nice, but I found a hard time with getting overheated. Once you got in the tent, you really had to take everything off because they got so hot in there. And back then, in that day, we didn't have stuff that stayed. Once it got wet, you were kind of screwed. So
Sure,
you'd be really careful. But that was that school. That paid off because I immediately came back from there and knowing how to ski, went out and bought all my brand new equipment. We, being in Massachusetts, we had a ski resort 30 minutes away called Mount Wachusett.
Yeah.
Had night skiing. You could go over there and ski at night. New Hampshire, Vermont. 10th group was training at Camp Ethan Allen before there was ever a mountain warfare school there.
Wow.
And I went to the mountain warfare school in 2001. And I remember being there and go, hey, there's my old barracks where we used to be at 10th group. And I remember when I was there as a student in the mountain warfare course in 2001, the guy's like, this is Mount Mansfield. If you come back in the wintertime, you'll get to climb up on this. Has anybody done this? Yeah, I've done it about a dozen times. Nothing new. But 10th group did a really excellent winter warfare program at Camp Ethan Allen. And our program there, when we did it as a unit, it was just our battalion. So it was 3rd Battalion. So you imagine, okay, a battalion sounds like a lot of guys. What's an SF battalion? So maybe 200 max.
Yeah.
If you can get 200 guys that weren't off doing other things, right? But we would go up there for 2 weeks. Ski instructors would go up there for 2 weeks, go through a clinic, nothing but downhill skiing. Battalion would come up. We would split everybody up and do an evaluation. And we would part you with how well you skied,
Okay.
not what team you were on. And so for the next 2 weeks, you skied with guys that were equal to you. And then that way you could get better.
Sure.
Right. And then after a couple of weeks, they do team training for 2 weeks and then do an exercise for usually a week minimum, 2 weeks. But, next thing you know, you just spent 5 to 6 weeks in Vermont.
Skiing
6-7 days a week.
Not bad. And military trained, which, we've often seen that the military has a way of sucking out the fun of things.
It's always that last week. That's why I always get into it. It's always that last week. Okay, now it's time to do an exercise. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Now, did that training, did that come in handy?
The mountain warfare training later on, so not necessarily the ski training.
I just keep thinking about, you ever seen them?
I never really used the ski training in if you're referring back into a combat deployment.
Yeah.
I never really. Did it help with just later on with the team and do other, like when I got to Colorado in the National Guard, we had the mountains right there. Oh, I could, as a team sergeant in the National Guard, I could make stuff up that was wazoo. I mean, we're leaving Friday night. We'll see you guys Sunday afternoon. And they're like, can you come in early because we want to have a... No, I'm not coming in early. This is the only weekend I have with these guys. No, we're going up and we're going... Like Ski Cooper was a big area. Camp Hale was a big area we could go up to. I remember one time taking my team up there and the guys were like, what are we doing? I'm like, we're going to do cross-country skiing. And I didn't tell them where we were headed. And where we were headed is if you ever go to Ski Cooper, it's near Leadville, Colorado. They have cross-country trail system. And during the wintertime, they have a yurt along that trail system that's nothing but a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
So we cross-country skied all morning long to the restaurant.
That's great training.
And then skied back down. And everybody's like, how'd you know about this? And it's like, well, that's what you pay the team sergeant to know, right? To figure out how to add that stuff in.
Yeah, job security. Don't ask me.
Exactly.
So after your ski training that you did this was right before your language course, right? Because you were on a break?
Yeah, so language training, so the winter, the ski training was every winter. So from 81 through 86, I was doing winter training every January, February.
Okay.
If I had to say we did a schedule, the main, and this kind of leads into the unconventional warfare training and some of the stuff later that I did in Europe. 10th Group ran a very large exercise every May and June all over Europe. And when I say all over Europe, we would base out of either England or Italy, and then we'd launch teams into Italy, southern Germany, Norway, northern Germany, and it was a full-blown unconventional warfare exercise. So it wasn't just go in and strike targets such as in DA missions. You had one of my ones that I did that was a lot of fun was in northern Italy. It was 26 days long. And they went through the whole phase of unconventional warfare and linking up with your guerrillas. And, the guerrillas didn't trust us and we had to win their trust. And the guerrilla chief tried to act like an a-hole. And, just that whole scenario of it. And then by the end of it, we've got 4 or 5 vehicles and we're hitting targets 50 kilometers away, just every night going out and, loading the G's up and which target are we hitting, and going out. But it was the whole evolution of that whole unconventional warfare, using the auxiliary, using the locals to support you. I mean, my favorite thing that I did in a trip to Germany, by that time I had gone through German language school. And where I went through German language school was there at Fort Devens. They brought in some teachers and ran a local program, very condensed, 90 days, 8 hours a day.
Wow.
You're really
That
in there every single, that's all you're doing. And then, you're getting deployed to Germany. Hey, even better. Now I get to use it. Phil, and by now I was the intel sergeant on the team. I'd been on the team 4 years, I think, in this particular story. And I, went down, tied a yellow ribbon around the tree, came back, watched for a little other signal up there's the other signal. Okay, that means it's going to be safe. That means tonight we're going to meet them at another spot. Then we come down and 2 Mercedes vans and this girl pops out. It's like she's like 18 years old. Speaks, and turns out her English was very good, so we didn't have to worry about how good my German was. But that was the kind of thing we were doing in Germany. We were, she's just a civilian girl, and we drive to her farmer's house or her farm, and her dad's in on it, her mom's in on it, and we stayed up in their barn for a week, running operations out of it.
Okay,
and those were the types of exercises that 10th Group had set up all through Germany. And I was in 3rd Battalion, so we always did either Southern Europe southern Germany or northern Italy.
Okay.
One of the exercises I actually went in.
Hold on 1 second.
Lose power.
One of the exercises I actually went in. That's where you were.
Okay. One of the exercises I went in with, it was 6 Americans and 6 Italians. And the Italians were wearing their Italian uniforms and carrying their Italian, weapons, which are not like any of ours, right?
Yeah.
And I remember it because I had, there were Marines that were acting as our aggressors. And I actually kind of got snatched up.
Oh, no.
Long story.
You got snatched up.
I got snatched up. The Marines had me. I was by myself because my captain got away.
He left you?
he actually did. He actually kind of.
Can you paint the picture for us?
Well, okay. So
Yeah.
we were going to link up with the other team,
Okay.
and we changed into civilian clothes. And I'm the intel guy. And there's certain rules about when you're going to link up with people, you have certain rules you have to establish. I knew the basics. I'm like, so we get to our point, they're not there. And I'm like, we've waited long enough. To me, it was 4 minutes. We've been here 2 minutes before, 2 minutes after. We're out of here.
Yeah.
And my captain was like, no, let's walk over here. No, let's walk over here. No, let's go check out this barn. Well, the Marines were inside the barn.
Oh, no.
And they thought we were Germans until we spoke English.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Gave
so
yourself
they
away.
heard us speaking English, and they're like, oh, those dirty rats, these guys have switched from uniforms into civilian clothes. So they followed us. And we were going back, and now we're waiting for our ride to swing back by and pick us up. Because we had a set time to come by. If nothing happens, come by and pick us up, and we'll get out of here. So we're sitting down waiting on it, and they had come up, and I played German. I played, no, what's going on? Well, my captain didn't. He went fisticuffs.
Oh, no.
And he was a big guy, right? And he won, and he took off running. And left me. Just left me. And I got captured, and they tied me up. And we were moving. They were going to move to their exfil point. And what was so funny about this particular story was that they went back, grabbed their rucksacks, and their rucksacks were bigger than anything I've ever carried. I was looking at it going, wow, that's a huge ruck, And as I'm standing there in blue jeans and T-shirt, and civilian clothes, I think I even had a fanny pack on. And they tie my hands up, and we go to walk across this field, and people are driving by, and they're seeing this. And we move up into the woods, and we moved about a half a mile or so, and then they got down to take a break. My team was right there. The team that I was trying to link up with, I look up, and all of a sudden, well, there's TJ, there's Dave, there's the Italians, oh my God, I'm just going to, and they ambushed them and captured 5 of those guys.
Oh, how funny.
5,
Wow.
and one of them got away. He ran off. The other 5, they were loaded down with rucksacks on.
Yeah.
And when they saw these Italians coming at them, they didn't know what to think. It was one thing to see Americans with M16s, but when these Italians are pointing these Berettas at you, and most of them are submachine guns, they thought they were really live, ammo.
Yeah, and some real trouble.
But they gave up, and I got set free, and I immediately, honestly, I went down to the road, and I stuck out my thumb, and the German stopped by and said, "Are you okay?" This is all in German. "Are you okay? Because we saw you getting hauled out." "Oh no, it's just a military exercise. Can you give me a ride?" They're like, "Yeah, sure, get in." So I got in the car. They gave me a ride. I had to go about 20 miles.
Oh.
We had holed up in a barn at another auxiliary location. I had them drive me down close to where that barn was at, and I got out, and I got there before the captain got back. So I was waiting there.
What did he go on
With
foot?
your feet up?
He
yeah.
went on foot the entire way. And we've got an evaluator, and the evaluator's, he knows that I'm already I'm hiding in the back of the barn, and the captain, they got Phil, they captured him. And they go, well, what, you think we ought to move? You think we need to change our location? Oh, no, Phil won't talk. He won't give up. He won't give up our location. And they're like, I don't know. I think we need a second opinion. And I step out from behind them. I'm like, Captain, what took you so long? Where you been? And he just looks at me like, what? How did you get? I'm like, look, I linked up with the team. We're meeting up with them at 10 o'clock tonight. As soon as they hit, so they had to hit a target, and we were going to pick them up after they hit their target and bring them down to this location. And so that was one of the typical events, exercises that
had to be a blast, to be honest.
And I didn't tell the fun part about that, but those 5 Marines gave up the codes, the passcodes, the challenge and passcodes for getting onto the target. So when our guys went to get on the target, they got challenged, they gave the password and walked right on in.
Let them right through.
Because we didn't tell them that we caught the Marines. That was the deal. We won't tell anybody we caught you if you give us the password and the challenge and password. And they did, and we never reported that we ever caught them.
Oh, that's too funny.
That's interesting. But those are the kind of the deals you have to make.
Kind of deals you got to make, right?
Yeah.
And that could kind of lead up into an Afghanistan story. I did have a Peter San on my team in Afghanistan.
Okay.
A guy named Jorge Mazariegos. He was a weapons guy, just like in the Green Berets. He was my Peter San. That guy could negotiate. Well, I'll go ahead and jump to the story because it's a really good one. Calls me up. I'll set it up. He's at Kandahar Airfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the city. And if you know your Afghanistan at all, the airfield's kind of like DFW airport is to downtown.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about 20 miles, 12, 15 miles, straight line distance. But go on the road, it's a, 35, 40-minute drive into town.
What year is this?
2002. So I was
So
over
it's brand new
Early.
at this point.
Oh, yeah, but I should back up. I was in Task Force Dagger. My team briefed Colonel Mulholland. We went in and we actually replaced a 5th Group team in February of 2002.
Very
And
new
it
then.
was a tail end of Task Force Dagger. But I was on the ground in Kandahar before Anaconda went off.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm on the ground, and this is now in April. It could have, I may get my timeline wrong here, but we'd been there now.
I don't think anyone's going to spot check you.
Yeah. But Jorge we had taken half the team, and half the team is at the airfield working as a liaison with all the spec ops that was out there. And during 2002, the Rangers were there, 3rd Group was there, SEALs were there.
Yeah.
And every country known to man, the Kiwis, the Norwegians, and I'm like, where did all these guys come from? Oh, wow, I was glad I was downtown, completely separate away from the big Army base, right? We were living with the governor in the governor's kind of compound, and there was only 20 of us, 20 Americans. And our whole security relied upon the Afghans, inner and outer security, right? But it was a very good, I felt pretty secure. It was a very good inner walls, outer walls, right? So you had to get through multiple checkpoints. It was like 3 checkpoints before you're even getting close to where the Americans are. And so Jorge calls up one day on the radio and says, he goes, Phil, you know that restaurant right there outside the first checkpoint? And I said, yeah, right across the street from it. He goes, yeah. And he goes, send one of the Terps over there and tell them to order 20 fried chickens. I'm like, they serve fried chicken? He goes, yeah, they do. And I didn't know that. He goes, yeah. He goes, what are you doing later? I go, well, I can free my calendar. Because what are you going to do with 20 fried chickens? I'm kind of curious about this. And he goes, yeah, you need to come along. And I said, okay. So Jorge, at the time we were driving Toyota Tacoma pickup trucks. Wasn't any, we didn't even wear uniforms.
Sure.
It was all civilian clothes, full beards. And he comes in driving a Toyota. We go over the Terp. We sent the Terp over there, got the order made. He comes in to pick it up, stops by the operations center that we had set up at the governor's compound, and he picks me up. And we go back into the base, and he goes, I said, well, what's on the list? He goes, well, first he goes, you guys need a bunch of lumber and some sandbags, and, you want to beef up, we were trying to beef up the rooftop, to kind of make it a little bit more secure if we had to actually have to go up there and fight from it.
Yeah.
Because when I got there was really only about one layer of sandbags. And then you had to be prone the whole time.
Yeah.
So we were trying to beef up our security a little bit. And we had 3 main positions on top of the roof, and plus you're always making improvements to your living conditions.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
You need supplies, especially plywood. Right. And we pull up, and I forget her name, but this 101st Airborne was there at the time. The Rakasans, I think, were even the ones that were there. And we pull into the supply depot, and this female black staff sergeant, Jorge, you got my fried chicken? Yes, ma'am, I do. Hand it over. And he hands her 2 of these fried chickens. She goes, you know where you're going? Yes, ma'am, I do. We had free reign of the place.
Oh, there you go.
He could get anything he wanted, and that was just the first stop. I mean, it was like that all afternoon. We went by the Germans. They got fried chicken. Well, no, we had to go. We wanted to get beer from them.
Okay.
So in order to get beer, we had to get steak. So we traded fried chicken for more steak. I mean, it was just like the whole Peterson thing. Well, I got the Ho Chi Minh sandals here, and then I got it from here, and that's what Jorge was doing. He was wheeling and dealing, and we got everything we needed.
Oh, that's funny.
And you. This was at that time you mentioned it was still kind of cowboy time. I mean, yeah, we didn't have to get permission to go outside the wire. We just went. I got up every day, went down to the operations center, and wrote on the board where I was going.
You can find me here.
Which vehicle I was taking. And that, kind of leads into some other stuff. We had no military vehicles. We didn't have Humvees. Everything was Toyota Tacoma pickups or up armored Mercedes, those vans.
Yeah.
And we didn't mind those, one, because they had air conditioning. And they were armored, But if air conditioning didn't work, I wasn't taking it.
Not checking that thing
Got
out.
standards.
Yeah. I always remember one of my times I was hanging out, and your buddies from the Ranger Battalion. I forget which one they
Second.
Well, you were in second.
Yeah. Which one they were?
I forget which one these guys were from, but outside of Kandahar, I think they renamed it Gecko.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Well, there wasn't really any formal name, but we had an A team out there, and that A team was from 985 ODA 985 from 19th Group, and I knew their team sergeant out there, and they had asked me to go out there for about a month and be with them, and I had. We were kind of winding down already where I was at because the 20th Group team was coming in because we'd been there about 9 months. And I went out to Gecko before it was Gecko, and I'm doing the, you'd appreciate that. I got my Ranger panties on, got my flip-flops, I think I probably had a T-shirt on. It's August. It's hot.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's hot. These guys pull up, and they're desert mobility vehicles, caked in dirt, caked in dust, and those are pretty sharp, And I was kind of doing it on purpose. Yeah, this thing's a shit. Da da da. Well, what do you got on the back there? Yeah, you guys got a CD player? You got any air conditioning? Yeah, my Toyota does. Yeah. and we had actually taken our Toyotas and had put gun mounts on them.
Okay.
We had taken PVC pipe on the sides, and we could put RPG rounds. So, because I didn't really like the AT4s. I don't know how y'all's worked with y'all's, but we actually had some duds.
Okay.
Once they got dirt and sat around. For example, we had them up by one of our, emergency positions up on top of the roof, and we had to keep it covered, to keep it clean, because we made the mistake of not doing it.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you went up there to we took them out to the range to test fire them, and half of them wouldn't shoot.
It's a problem.
But the RPGs, could always pull that round out and reload another round into it.
Yeah, those things.
But yeah, we did. We used their weapons, our weapons, a whole mix. If we captured some, we'd try to, either give it to our Afghans that we were working with, or we would try to use it ourselves.
Okay.
And by the time we were done, I think all of our trucks had been, modified to some degree. But you didn't want to go too much because you didn't want to stand out.
Yeah, that too. Then you're a target.
So.
And how's your interaction with the locals at that point too? So your mission priority, being that embedded into the city, as well as what that looked like for you on a day-to-day basis.
Let me go on. Let me talk a bit about that role that I played there on that particular year, and let me maybe even go back a deployment earlier. I had started off as a weapons guy. I got my engineer qualification. Got sent to commo school forcefully. Learned commo. But if you're an operator, you're a guy on a team. You always want to eventually make your way up to be the team sergeant, right? And there's a stepping ladder going through that. And to me, I had to go through it was called Operations and Intelligence course. I think now it's called the Assistant Operations course. 18 Fox course, I think, is probably what they call it now, because it gives you an MOS of 18 Fox.
Okay.
And when I went through, it was called the O&I. It was Special Forces Operations and Intelligence School. It was 4 months long. It was very intense. And, it was worse than going to college. Area studies, photography projects, research papers, finally, exams every Friday, and it's paperwork, it's typing. This is when I went through in 1985, I remember my roommate paying somebody to type everything he had.
Interesting.
He went to a place at Fort Bragg and would hand him his handwritten stuff, and it would come back typed up for him. And,
wow.
And this just shows you how the technology changes. I thought I was high speed because I went out and rented a typewriter that could memorize one whole page.
Oh.
And thought I was badass because I could type a page, review it. Oh, it got one type. Yep. And I could just redo it, make that one correction and then redo it. But so anyway, that was back in the day there. And so I started off. So that got me into an intel, they call it the intelligence sergeant slot on a team. And I did that for a long time.
All right, Phil, we're going to go ahead and pause you right there. We've got a lot of information, and we've got a lot more stories to continue telling, so we're going to stop this episode right here. We're going to continue bridging that into next week. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. This has been part 1 of 2 with Mr. Phil Stone telling his amazing stories as a Green Beret. Next week, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Afghanistan and Phil's time in West Berlin, excuse me. But tune in next week to hear a little bit more about his stories and then his time with the Special Forces Association as well. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
See you next time.